And it's been so long, let's hit you with another one. Look what you made me do, look what I made for you. Knew if I paid my dues, how will they pay you? When you first come in the game, they try to play you. Then you drop a couple of hits, look how they wave to you. From Marcy to Madison Square, because the only thing that matters is just a matter of years. Fate, habit, J status appears to be an all-time high. Perfect time to say goodbye. When we come back like Jordan, we're in the 4-5. I hate to play games with you. It's to aim at you, probably maim you. If I owe you, I'm blowing you to smithereens. And with that, we welcome you to Early Stoppage, a show where the news of the day is usually given just enough time, but sometimes not enough. I'm John Franklin, and I will be joined, as always, by Craig Allen of Fight Night Picks in Between the Links. On this episode of Early Stoppage, we discuss a myriad of things. But let's first get to something, because it's been a minute since we've seen you. This is for the Patreon. Craig, I have two subjects just to get us back in the swing of things before we make it official. The choice is yours. Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury versus the MMA heavyweights, or the Houston Astros cheating scandal, and what scandal may be coming down the pike for MMA. The choice is yours, my friend.
Okay, listen, this is a bad way to start an MMA podcast, and I hate doing this, and I'm against it. I'm truly against it, but I am a big baseball fan. And I turned beet red, the same color as the tiles behind me, when I read that Mookie Betts was traded from the Red Sox. They were going to fire their manager, and the Houston Astros are an absolute banging on the garbage can dumpster fire. So let's talk about a scandal.
All right, so let's talk about a scandal. Do you see anything coming down the pike for MMA? Do you see anything that could be?
I do, and it's something that that hasn't totally been talked about. I can see it a little bit in the notes, so maybe I won't totally allude to it. But there's something that was brewing and festering before January, and then there was a fight that happened, and now we haven't heard about it. Is that where we're going with this?
No. Tell me.
Okay. Remember before Conor McGregor fought Donald Cerrone, how there was a lot of bad press around Conor McGregor about potential litigious issues in his home country of Ireland? Well, we've got a fight card coming up in Ireland this weekend. We've got two of them, Bellator Dublin, Bellator 240. I would assume that Conor McGregor will be in attendance. I mean, Charlie Ward's fighting on the card. There's a lot of SBG fighters, but Charlie Ward's kind of the main one that I think of, just based on, what was it, Bellator 187 when he jumped into the cage, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So he's probably going to be there, and that totally overshadows anything. The fight overshadowed anything. And that's one of those things where it's a scandal if you want to make it a big scandal, which this is the biggest star in the sport. So yeah, that's one of those things that a lot of people aren't talking about now. I'm sure it'll get brought up more as court proceedings go along, if they will. I know they're, more behind closed doors over in Ireland. You can't talk about these type of subjects. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in not only early 2020, but as it goes along. And Conor McGregor's talked about wanting to take more and more fights, or fight more often than he has. So it's going to be something that comes up every time. It's just like if Greg Hardy comes into the octagon, people are going to say things about him. Like they're going to keep bringing up his past. It's going to be the same thing with Conor McGregor. And that's one of those ugly things that with Greg Hardy, it's been, quote unquote resolved. With Conor McGregor, there's no resolution yet or to be seen. So it'll be interesting. I think that's one of those things that if you want to compare it to a Houston Astros scandal, that's one where when you take the lid off of that, who knows what could come out. It could be a Pandora's box, so to speak.
Absolutely. All right, so that's a perfect segue, Craig. That's why you're such a professional and why everybody wants your services. Let's begin officially with Bad Boys for Life. Craig, Conor McGregor and Jon Jones have spent their careers finding not just massive success, but also at times massive trouble. They have, for the most part, avoided big career-altering mistakes, and now the fighters and those around them swear that they've turned the page on their notorious ways. Chael Sonnen has publicly said that Jon Jones has been a man of his word and kept all his promises, and John Kavanagh has said Conor McGregor has owned up to his mistakes and is a good comeback story. Craig, how much of all this are you buying, and how much of it is just good PR?
I guess Chael Sonnen isn't totally directly connected with Jon Jones. So you can't say, like it's a total PR work. But when you have your coach and the main guy, the face of SBG, and John Kavanagh stepping up to the plate for Conor McGregor, it kind of ties into the conversation that I already had. And that's why I wasn't sure where this was going to go. Because for Conor McGregor, it's certainly good PR. For Jon Jones, it's more the same. I mean, he's in a position where, his indiscretions happened, not in the last couple of months, but we're talking years at this point. So, yeah, I would say it's probably work of good PR. What would you say on this one?
Here's what concerns me about it. I do think it's good PR. I will say this, and every time you kind of mention this one word I'm about to mention, everybody's like, oh, here we go. And I'll say this. I believe Conor McGregor and Jon Jones to be addicts. And unless they've taken the proper, I hate to say steps because that's the addicts thing. But unless they've gone through that process, I don't know that they've really changed all that much. And if they just kind of looked and said, the bank account isn't what I want it to be, and I'm the reason why. If they, there's a difference between dealing with your addiction and being self-aware enough to understand that you're self-sabotaging yourself. And I think that they are the latter. And I don't know how much of the former they're interested in doing. I can't speak to it, but I know their behavior speaks to the behavior of addicts, and I haven't seen them go away for long stretches of time to get it looked at, like in the way that like Tiger Woods has, or some of these other people that were very public about their rehabilitation. So again, I don't know these guys on a personal level. They're certainly away from the fight game long enough to do stuff like that. So I don't know, but that's the concern for me, is that both of them have this kind of devil on their shoulder that I don't know if they're properly dealing with.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. And I mean, if we kind of switch gears here a little bit and get into another topic, John, Israel Adesanya, he's one of those guys, he's no stranger to picking fights with guys who are bigger than him. But up until now, he hasn't picked any fights with any of the heavyweights. I mean, he's gone after some light heavyweights. And like I said, I mean, that was up until now. But he and his coach, Eugene Behrman, they're kind of saying that Stipe Miocic is kind of the name. And my question for you is this about Stipe Miocic, all of this conversation, or is it just kind of a blanket over a potential Jon Jones fight?
I don't know if it's a blanket over a Jon Jones fight or if it's just Israel Adesanya subtweeting Jon Jones. I think that Israel Adesanya wants to do one of two things. He either wants to defeat Jon Jones in a cage and pronounce himself as the greatest mixed martial arts fighter in doing so, or he wants to take everything away from Jon Jones that he values. And if he can say to Jon Jones, listen, if we are all things that are equal, right? Like the one thing that Adesanya can't say is that he's as diverse a fighter as Jon Jones, but he's a bigger star. And Adesanya can take a Miocic fight away from Jon Jones if he wants to. He really could. I mean, he's a bigger star. And I think this is an Israel Adesanya flex if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I think it's one of those things where, what is it? You shoot for the moon and you land amongst the stars. Isn't that what they put in every classroom in North America? That's just one of those things. You aim high with Stipe Miocic. You know that the eye is a potential issue, and that's really holding up the entire heavyweight division at this point. So you know that that's an issue. Let's just throw Stipe's name on a board, and if we miss, we land on Jon Jones. And I think that's a fight that does make some sense. Again, it holds up another division, but at least we're not like Bellator at this point, and we're going for 6 different divisions held up by 3 different champions. So I'm fine with it, but to answer the question, I think it's more about Jon Jones and less about Stipe Miocic, and it's a good opportunity for a little bit more brand exposure for Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that Izzy's got the world in his hands, and I think that he can do whatever he wants. Let's talk about another champion who's kind of changed his tune a little bit. I want to talk about Kamaru Usman. I want to talk about Colby Covington, and I want to kind of transition this into a much larger conversation. This is really like a start in the conversation, but about but I don't want to get into a start the conversation. I don't want to get into a sparring sessions about this. So let's talk about it in this way. Craig, Kamaru Usman has seemed to change his tune with regards to Colby Covington and now seems to want a rematch because the finish of that fight left him unfulfilled. listen, we can talk about this specific situation. I want to get a little bit into the Aljamain Sterling, Henry Cejudo stuff. I want to get a little bit into the Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury stuff. A lot of this is entering race into the equation. And we have a pretty long-standing stance on this podcast that we are two white guys and we're not here to lecture anyone about race. But it does raise an interesting question. And the question is walking the race tightrope, or even worse, using race as a gimmick to promote a fight, first, fair to the fans? Does it do more harm than good? And is it really worth entering into these relationships, these toxic relationships, just for a high-dollar fight?
It's generated a lot of buzz on social media this week. I know that's why we're talking about it. And again, like you said, like we definitely have a different perspective on this kind of thing. I know we play a pretty tight rope, and I think it's bad. It's bad for the fans. It's not good for the fighters. You can see it get toxic. You look at the fight and it's not the same, but you can draw some parallels from it. Conor McGregor, when he fought Khabib Nurmagomedov, and I don't want to feed a fed horse with Conor McGregor, and it's not going to be an entire Conor McGregor show, but he went after Khabib for, his religion, where he's from. He went after all of those different issues, and there was more than bad blood. There was hatred on social media, in the cage, and then after the cage, you have Khabib hopping over at Dylan Dennis. You have a full-out brawl. Do I think that what we have going on right now between Wilder and Fury and Aljamain Sterling, Henry Cejudo, is it going to boil over into something like that? I don't, but just the fact that we have to talk about this, it's not a good thing. I mean, you see the different things that come out of fans' mouths and off of their keyboards on social media. It can never be a good thing. You look at hockey, and I think that's a perfect microcosm. You look at hockey and you look at the way that old enforcers would get into fights, and normally a little bit of name calling, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They wouldn't attack somebody's family. They wouldn't get into race and this and that. You have a little bit of a spat, then you go on your pals after the fight. In MMA, it's kind of a similar way to build a fight. You dislike this person, they dislike you. You engage in a little bit of a war of words, but you never attack a person's identity. And that's one of these things that it's an odd flex, and it's something that I don't think necessarily belongs. On the flip side, I could see somebody saying, hey, Craig, this is cage fighting. Come on. But yeah, I mean, it's 2020. We don't need stuff like this. You could disagree with me if you want, but I just don't feel that there's a huge place for this in the sport.
Yeah, I agree. And my problem with it really is that, and I'm going to, someone who we'll get to in a little bit more depth later on, I'm going to enter into the conversation here, which is Donald Trump. I think that the danger in a guy like him, whether you think he's a great president or you don't, is that he sort of incites his supporters into a certain type of behavior that he himself is not engaging in. So he's doing things and riling folks up and getting them going at each other so that everybody on the lower level is going crazy. Meanwhile, he's either committed to this and a truly dark individual, or he's just doing all this as a means to be, elected as president. And I think that there's a little bit of that at work in combat sports. People start getting their race relations riled up, and they have a lot more, pardon the pun, skin in the game than the people that are starting this stuff, right? And even Colby Covington had to back it off a little bit. And I think that even Henry Cejudo today backed it off. I do think that some of it is a little bit interesting. I think the question that Andreas Hale asked of Deontay Wilder today was a fair one. And I think that Tyson Fury jumped the gun on it because he's tired of being the other side of the coin. He's tired of being like, okay, if I win, now I'm somehow suppressing black excellence, or I'm somehow halting the civil rights movement of 2020. He doesn't want to, he's like, we're just two guys fighting. And I can appreciate that from his perspective, but I think he needs to understand that, you're the other part of history in a way. And you have to get that. If you want to fight a guy who's as connected to the community as Deontay Wilder is, a lot comes with that. And you can distance yourself from it, and you can say, hey, we're all the same, whether Deontay Wilder was purple, green, this, that, or the other. And you can believe it, but you got to understand, if you put yourself in a certain position, you're on that side of history, whether you want to be or not. And I think that's where he's at. And I think all these guys need to understand that O.J. Simpson is a perfect example. O.J. Simpson, by all accounts, and said by people who are much more plugged in than me, was leading a life full of white friends. And as soon as everything went down with him, everybody took their sides, right? Everybody went to the side of race. Not everybody, because I didn't, but I'm just saying that's how people were. And it was like, for me, this is the danger in that. So I think that if you're going to promote a fight, if you're going to say you hate a guy, and listen, the promoters, guys, I'm sure if any fighters listen to this, this, but the fighters will happily let you play that game to sell tickets. They don't care. They can distance themselves away from it. So,
all right, John, with that in the bag, let's get a little bit squirrely. So UFC Rio Rancho, you had 6,449 fans in attendance, was not the type of event that was going to set any attendance records. But what has everybody's attention and what captured the buzz after the weekend that was UFC Rio Rancho? John, Diego Sanchez's lone corner man, Josh Fabia. That name is going to be – you want to talk O.J. Simpson? Josh Fabia right now is the Kato Kalin of 2020. He made the media rounds today with all the major outlets, and he defended himself and his prowess as a coach. John, what are we going to do with this guy?
Not much, because Diego doesn't have, we would think, not that much of a fighting career left. I do think that Diego, if you have any money out there that you want to bet, you can bet all of it on the fact that Diego Sanchez is someday going to fight in bare knuckle. That's going to happen, 1,000%. So we may see this guy for a while. I don't know what he's trying to position himself to do. I don't know if he just doesn't want to be clowned publicly, or if he's trying to maybe – this guy doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that wants to train other fighters. Like that he's like, oh, you can't ruin my name, because I think he's a Diego's guy and that's it. He just doesn't like getting clowned by everybody. So he went out on a media tour. He probably did more harm than good. And I think that we'll see him as long as we see Diego.
This is MMA's Bagel Boss. And I'm wearing, if this is only audio, you can't see the hot take sunglasses. This is MMA's Bagel Boss. This is a donkey that's really drug a couple of people in the circle into it. A couple of different MMA characters. And Emil Mech is a perfect example. There's a video out there of him kind of training with Josh Fabia. But this is just one of those guys that, Diego Sanchez brought me in as a coach. I'm going to try and capitalize on it. Hey, we have weird walkout. We have weird moments in the fight. And now all of a sudden MMA media outlets are calling, and that phone won't stop ringing until next Wednesday at the latest, when everybody has their scoop. And you're not going to hear about this guy until Diego Sanchez fights again. And will that be the last time? Who knows? And will Diego Sanchez fight in bare knuckle? I mean, if Hector Lombard can do it and Chris Lieben can, then I think Diego Sanchez can as well. But what are we going to do with this guy? He seems to be doing a lot more harm than good. I know a lot of people are of that mindset. I would probably agree with it. I mean, if Trevor Whitman, one of the most, respected coaches in the game, is sitting cage side for a Diego Sanchez fight and is calling out the coach and asking, like, really, what is this guy doing? Is he clowning on the MMA community? I don't really know. But what are we going to do? Hopefully we don't see him out too much more. I mean, he's not one of those guys. Like, he's done so much damage to his own brand that it's not like a Jackson Wink close by or American Top Team or even SBG in Ireland. They're not clamoring to sign this guy and have him coach their fighters. I don't think, anyway. I mean, what do you think?
No, I don't think so either. But I want to just take a quick little detour because, we're a couple segments in. We haven't done the show for a while. I have a little bit of advice for you. Here's what I need.
Uh-oh.
I need 5 recovery breaths. 5 recovery breaths. Sip the water. Breathe in. Good. 5 recovery breaths. In the nose, out the mouth. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. You're stopping your motion. Do not wait to see your work, Craig. I need forward pressure. I need you to get off the line before you attack. Off the line before you attack. B drill. Think of the shadow. I need you to get in. Get behind. If it gets tight, if it gets sticky, take him to the ground. Get on top. Give me some ride time. Give me some ground and pound. And
is this advice for a cage fight or advice in the bedroom? Are you like a sex therapist now?
Listen, if you saw that picture that Ariel posted with him and Diego, who the hell knows? It was sketch at best. All right, Craig.
That's true.
We've broached this topic a few times before, but it just keeps coming back. To haunt us as Mauricio Shogun, who has been booked to take on Minotauro Nogueira for a trilogy at UFC 250. They met in Pride in 2005, 2015 at UFC 190. Shogun is up 2-0. Craig, A, does this fight make much or any sense in 2020? And B, at 38 and 43, is this where these two hang up the gloves for good, win or lose?
Okay, so Minotauro Nogueira is 2-4 since 2014. And Shogun Rua, on the flip side, is actually enjoying a resurgence since about that time. Let's say 2015. He is 4-1 with one draw against Paul Craig in a tight fight. I thought Paul Craig won that fight. This is weird. This is a really weird matchup. Like the first time that they fought, like you said, 2005, then 2015. They were booked to fight in 2013. It fell apart. Now we get them in 2020. Does this fight make much sense? Makes sense for Shogun. It's probably a lot easier of a fight than Paul Craig or Tyson Pedro that he's fought in the past. And you look at this, I mean, yeah, Nogueira beat, who was it, Sam Alvey? Finished him in the second round, weird fight. And then he got knocked out by Ryan Spann. So it's kind of one of those ones that win or lose is probably it for Nogueira. Whereas I could see Shogun continuing on, past the age of 40 if he's 38 now.
So from Google, the word Shogun is a title that was granted by the emperor to the country's top military commander. Of all the people that I see that I feel like are, quote, hanging on too long, all right, and we talk about someone's reputation and we talk about their legacy. When I think of Shogun, he is the last person that I am worried for when he goes into a fight. I don't care how many fights he's lost in a row. I have no concern for this guy, right? That is how much I respect his legacy. That's how tough of a guy I think he is. I don't feel, even if he gets knocked out 2-3 times in a row, I still feel like when he goes in there, he's going in there of able body and able mind. So from that perspective, listen, I don't even know if this is a horrible metaphor I'm about to use here, but this guy deserves the right to go out on his sword, if anybody does, because he's shown a propensity in the history of his career to kind of rally, and he is well able to defend himself. So however Shogun wants to go out, that's how he's going to go out. As far as this fight is concerned, there's many more trilogies that I would like to see besides this one. I
mean, BJ Penn lost, 7 in a row to cap off his UFC career, and Rashad Evans lost 5 in a row, and now he's doing the toad all the time. So it could be worse. It could be worse. All right, if we continue along, John, it's a hot button topic, seeing as a fighter that we're going to talk about has about this weekend, so I feel like it's only fair that we dive into the subject. And we can take this in a whole lot of different ways. But today, John, rowdy Bec Rawlings met with Peter Carroll of MMA Fighting ahead of Bellator, Dublin, or 240 to address the money situation, especially with respect to her OnlyFans account. Listen, John, it only costs $20 to subscribe to Bec Rawlings on OnlyFans per month. That's $240 per year you could be spending on Bec Rawlings. Now, realistically, that seems like a good deal. She said that realistically, she's focused on fighting. She's not just fighting for the money. She's more financially secure than ever. And with respect to her OnlyFans account, she said, and I quote, "It's like a subscription to see cool content." So, John, let's face facts. Bec Rawlings is on a 5-fight losing streak in MMA. What do you make of her asking fight fans for only $20 per month to just see some cool content?
Yeah. Well, she sent a tweet out, which I'll be the one to read because you got a future in this business and you're classy. And here's the tweet. But essentially the tweet was to see ass and titties, no porn, was what she tweeted out. It was a quote tweet of the actual tweet that said, this interview. Listen, I'm a lot older than you are, Craig, and I'm from a time when, beautiful women and adult content and girls in bikinis were not just readily available, right? You bought a magazine or you did whatever you did, right? So my point is this. If you go on Instagram, you are overwhelmed with the amount of women who just post selfies or post pictures or, and they do that just for followers, and then they try and monetize that. Okay, so my point in saying all that is if this girl has a little bit more financial security and she's able to fight without that hanging over her head. And she's doing that simply by removing all the same things that were on social media and putting them behind a paywall. I'm fine with that. And if that means that she had 100,000 followers before, and now she only has 25,000 people willing to do OnlyFans, and she loses that percentage of whatever you want to call it, following or interest, then that's for her to reconcile. But I think that if that's how she's – listen, and if she wanted to take it further with OnlyFans, that's her business. I'm just saying that if this is a means for her to get financially secure and not have to go through the whole rigmarole of like, I have to get a number of followers, I have to find sponsorship, blah, blah, blah. She's just like direct – this sounds like a horrible way to say this, but she just wants to go direct to consumer. So be it. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, I set this question up as kind of a joke, but if I was in the position to do something like that with MMA content, let's say, why wouldn't I do it? Really? Like, it's a win-win if you're Bec Rawlings. So yeah, it's a smart business decision. If you no longer have to put yourself through the rigor of training for a fight, the anxiety, the dieting, the weight cutting, and then, oh yeah, you're going to get punched in the face and either win or lose a fight, and your livelihood typically depends on a win bonus. If you can cut that out of it and post pictures on the internet, go for it. I mean, go for it. It's 2020. Who cares, really?
Now, with that being said, I do think that, and there's no way you can control this, but I do think that I wish there was a better way to sort of control that content because, you know, some of this stuff, like honestly, I think a nice revenue stream is Cameo. I hate that people take the cameos and then put them on Twitter to make fun of somebody. I think that, I mean, I enjoy,
I'm Captain America, John. Come on, bud.
I hear you. They make me laugh, so I'm a little bit of a hypocrite, but at the same time, it's like, you know, guys are finding a revenue stream and you're making them less likely to do it because you're turning it into something it shouldn't be. And so my point is this. I hope that this doesn't turn into that for her. That's the only.
That's fair. I get
it. All right, Craig. It's time to make the case. It's been a minute since we made a case. Let's make the case because one of the biggest topics in MMA right now is Jon Jones' next opponent. So I'm going to hit you with each person that can really realistically lay claim to a fight with Jon Jones at 205 pounds. Just spoiler alert, you will not be hearing Stipe Miosic's name. These are all guys who would fight at 205 pounds. Not, even though that fight can be booked, it'll be booked at heavyweight. Stipe's not coming to 205. So we'll start with the person who is most recent, the prisoner of the moment pick, if you will, Jan Blachowicz. Make the case for Jan Blachowicz.
If Robin Williams were still on this earth and was Polish, he would sound like Jan Blachowicz and vice versa. I'm a big Jan Blachowicz supporter in the fact that he deserves the next title shot. I really do think he deserves the next title shot. He's 7-1 in his last 8 fights. He continues to finish fighters. Luke Rockhold comes up from 185 to 205, former champ, starches him, does the same thing to Corey Anderson, finish. Jacare Souza comes up, and he grinds out a very close fight. But if you consider the fact that Dominic Reyes was able to beat former middleweight champ, and that was it's been a minute since Chris Weidman was a champ. He's not fighting in the main event of an Oklahoma City card for nothing. But if he can get a fight like that, win it, and then go on to fight for a title, I think Jan Blachowicz really does deserve the next shot.
I'm with you, and I'll take it a step further. Guys, just so we're clear, as we go through these names, we're going to say things that contradict each other because we're making the case for each guy. So if Craig and I were the defense attorneys for Jan Blachowicz, that's what we would say. So my argument for Jan Blachowicz is obviously going to contradict my argument for Dominic Reyes. So let's talk out. Here's mine for Blachowicz. Very simply, and this is where it contradicts Reyes. Some of these other guys on the list, he's already fought. Dominic Reyes had his shot, whether you think he won or not. The one thing I will say is he did not perform well in the championship rounds. So if he won the first 3 and that means you win, I completely agree with that. But there's a case for him leaving it up to interpretation. So Jon Jones has done that. You should not subject a champion to having to fight someone he's already beat, no matter how close the fight was. All right, Craig, let's move on to Dominic Reyes. Make the case for Dominic Reyes.
Dominic Reyes is more than just a flavor of the month. This is a guy that's been on a slow burn. He was undefeated coming into this fight as a pro and an amateur. You're putting together, a win streak that's into the double digits, and then you go and you fight Jon Jones. You give him, like you said, 3 very, very hard-fought rounds where he pushed the pace. And, you could argue and say that, yeah, he won round 1 and 3 and maybe not 2. But in the opinion of many, he did win the first 3 rounds. Jones won the last 2. It's an immediate rematch that deserves to happen. I mean, this is a guy that, John Jones hasn't been pushed to the brink like this since he threw the 12-6 elbow against Matt Hamill, and everybody seems to want to forget about it. So realistically, Dominic Reyes is a guy that for sure deserves the next title shot at 205. Dominic Reyes is the guy.
Well, part of this here that is an issue is that one of the judges in that fight is now coming under huge criticism. So now if his card were completely opposite, would it have swung the fight? No, Jones still would have won. But my point in saying this is that's one thing that calls into question the entirety of the fight. The other thing is that, Keith and I talked about this on the recap, is that what I admire about Dominic Reyes is even though he was not taking it to John Jones in 4 and 5, he was still sticking to the game plan. It's just that it was later in the fight, and he had not spent that much time in a cage in his career. So he was still, making John work and looking to counter. It's just the counters weren't as effective. And there wasn't 3-punch counters. There was 1-punch counters. So I think that he does have the recipe to beat John Jones. Some would say that he's already cooked it, but he does definitely have the recipe. So for that reason, I think that he's the best. You can make an argument he's the best matchup. Up next, Craig, Thiago Santos.
If we're talking about baking recipes, then Thiago Santos is the light heavyweight division's Emeril Lagasse. And I'm talking, bam! This is a guy that deserves the shot. This is the original guy. He was sitting in the kitchen writing the book. I mean, this is a guy, the first guy that really, really challenged John Jones. And, he was walking around on 2 bad knees. So the fact that he's able to fully heal up, if he's able to have 2 working legs, he's the guy that realistically deserves a shot, because you could argue for sure that Dominic Reyes isn't quite there yet. You could say Jan Blachowicz, yeah, but he beat Corey Anderson, a guy who some may describe as chinny. So, yeah, if Thiago Santos fully healthy, put him back into the mix, give him the fight against Jones. And that was the first one that really brought us along this path of, is John Jones actually human and not an alien sent on Earth to completely dominate the 205-pound division for years and years and years? Thiago Santos was the first guy to really attack that armor of John Jones and show that, yeah, again, he could possibly be human. So give Santos a shot. It makes tons of sense.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Thiago Santos was the first guy to take a card from John Jones.
The old split, yeah.
So, I mean, that right there speaks volumes about why he should be the next one to get it. And again, he's a guy who if the knock on people fighting John Jones is that John Jones takes you into deep water and drowns you, he took Thiago Santos into deep water, and Thiago Santos was still doing the backstroke. He was hurt, but he was still – I mean, he wasn't flailing. He wasn't dog paddling. He was still out there doing his thing. So in Santos, we see a guy who can go there with John Jones. The other case would be, like you made, is that for him and Blachowicz, and we didn't say this earlier, 35 for Santos, 36 for Jan Blachowicz. We got to get going with these guys, right? I'm not saying that they can't fight till they're 38, 39, 40, but this might be the best we're ever going to get from them. The argument Keith made, and this is my second Keith reference of the podcast, so I'm already beating myself up for that.
The new Chael.
He said Dominic Reyes might be a better fight a year from now. So you give him Blachowicz, you give him Santos, and then we see what Reyes has from a year from now. And if he can't keep his number one contendership for the next year, he doesn't deserve the shot. Talking about Reyes. All right. This gentleman is a champion in his own right. He has a belt around his waist. He would have to come up for this fight. Make the case for Israel Adesanya.
Oh, you're not talking about Gegard Mousasi? Come on, man. I mean, he's not the champ 185, but he very well could be. For Israel Adesanya, this is probably the guy that will generate the most traffic on social media. He's brash. He's undefeated in MMA. And as much as, and this is my major point here, he was on the Joe Rogan Experience. Joe Rogan loves, and he says it all the time. He said it on the Joe Rogan MMA show with Angela Hill this week. Where's Alex Pereira? Where's Alex Pereira? He's the guy that knocked out Israel Adesanya in Glory, and he's so strong and this and that. Where is Alex Pereira? I mean, nobody cares about him except for Joe Rogan. Nobody's talking about Alex Pereira. They're talking about Israel Adesanya because he's the biggest growing star in the sport right now. You put up the biggest up-and-comer who's still undefeated against John Jones, the greatest of all time at 205 pounds. How could you not sell that fight as one of the biggest fights of the year, the biggest fight for International Fight Week? I mean, yeah, you have to kind of worry about, are we going to have a repeat of UFC 200? But put Jon Jones in there against Israel Adesanya, and it's going to be absolute fireworks. The striker's paradise. And I doubt anybody disagrees with that fight, unless you have an old curmudgeon who wants to see 205 pounds continue to advance. But we're throwing out names like Blachowicz, Reyes, and Santos. And the only one that hasn't been there yet is Blachowicz. Israel Adesanya deserves a shot at the 205-pound belt more at the same, if not more, than anybody else on this list.
I don't want to compare these two because, I mean, I'm going to, but I don't want to because Jon Jones is a star in his own right, okay? But if Israel Adesanya fought Jon Jones, it might be the first time the B side is actually the A side. And when I say the B side is actually the A side, it's the first time, that's not true because when Conor McGregor fought Khabib Nurmagomedov, Conor was the B side in terms of the billing, but he was the A side in terms of who was bringing it. So, I mean, listen, Jon Jones, I'm not saying that Jon Jones or that Israel Adesanya is a bigger star than Jon Jones is. Everyone who knows who Israel Adesanya is probably knows who Jon Jones is. There are people who know who Jon Jones is that don't know who Israel Adesanya is. But in terms of the ability to market a fight, Israel Adesanya is leaps and bounds beyond Jon Jones. So from that perspective, Jones, and listen, in terms of diversity of skill set, Jon Jones walks into a cage with a pretty good chin and a full tool belt. So the odds of Israel Adesanya knocking him out are lower than Israel Adesanya knocking anyone else out because he's been hit with some of the biggest shots in MMA and survived them. So from that perspective, if you're Jon Jones, you definitely want that fight. I don't know that you want that. You know, I think that Israel Adesanya's Jon Jones' relationship with Adesanya is the same as it was with Cormier. He so desperately would never want to lose to this guy that who knows what the hell he's willing to do. I firmly believe that some of Jon Jones's PED stuff comes from not wanting to lose to Daniel Cormier. I have no proof, and I don't even know if the timelines link up. But that's the kind of guy that would drive you to not want to win at all costs. Adesanya's the same way. So I don't know if Adesanya brings the best out of Jon Jones, maybe in the cage, certainly not out of it. But, we'll see. All right, guys, here's the bonus round. I said I wasn't going to do it. I'm going to do it because we haven't been on for a while. Craig, why does Stipe Miocic make the most sense for Jon Jones' next opponent? Obviously, it won't be at 205, but why should Jones choose Stipe over everyone else?
All right, so you've got a bit of a log jam at 205 pounds because everybody wants that trilogy fight between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier, but everybody's kind of ignoring the obvious. Is Daniel Cormier going to fight again? I mean, you look at the fight that Miocic had with Cormier in the rematch, he knocked him out. Does he want to get knocked out again? Does he want to lose in the big spot again? Who knows? I mean, this is a guy that he's 40, and who knows if he's going to return to the cage. So realistically, you strike while the iron's hot. Jon Jones, possibly. Does he look human? Maybe. Is his boxing as crisp as it used to be? Probably not. Put him up against the best boxer, one of the best boxers that the heavyweight division's ever had in mixed martial arts against Stipe Miocic, and it's a fight that sells because all of a sudden you could, if Jones wins, champ. If Miocic wins, you beat a guy that, and this is air quotes if you're listening in the car, has never lost before. Matt Hamill will fight that one tooth and nail, but it's a great fight that you can sell. And again, it's one of those ones that you can market wherever. Don't have it in Houston. Don't do it in Texas, even though Stipe, if I'm not mistaken, the last time he fought in Texas, it was against Junior Dos Santos, and he banged his head off the canvas. But realistically, have it wherever you want in the world. Have it whenever you want in the calendar year. And it's a fight that sells. I mean, light heavyweight versus heavyweight, pound for pound greats. It's a fight that definitely sells and makes sense as well.
I agree. The only thing that Daniel Cormier can hold over Jon Jones' head is that he has two belts and Jon Jones doesn't. And I think that Jon Jones always has this thing with Cormier. And I think that his legacy is going to be defined alongside Daniel Cormier's. And I don't think he likes Daniel Cormier having something that he doesn't have. I think that if he takes that fight away from Cormier in the same way that Adesanya is, trying to take it away from him, I don't know how serious Adesanya is about that. But in that same way, then that's, it's a flex. It's him saying, listen, Stipe Miocic would rather fight me than you. Listen, I think Stipe Miocic has more to gain by fighting Jon Jones than Daniel Cormier again. So if they can put that thing together, that's what I think they should do. But, if we were going to let's not rank them. That's a different subject segment. All right, Craig, Let's move on to sparring sessions. I want to talk about Dana White. Dana White was in Colorado this evening to speak in support of Donald Trump. Dana has said in the past that he is not political. Speaking at the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and speaking at a Trump rally, kind of doesn't say that you are not political. Let's take Donald Trump out of the equation in terms of him being polarizing and him being the politician that we're directly speaking about. Should Dana be publicly supporting political candidates? How does it play into his fighters and their issues? Is he sending the right message? I'll let you lead off the sparring sessions.
I might be totally off base on this one, but in my mind, and just thinking about it, has Roger Goodell, Rob Manfred, or Gary Bettman gone to a national convention, Democratic, Republican, Libertarian, what have you, and publicly voiced support for a candidate? I can't think of it. Have any other major sports commissioners done that? And that's where Dana White's different, because he's the president of a company that's owned by an entertainment company. The NFL's the NFL, NHL's NHL. That's it. They're there to make money for the owners, whereas Dana White's there to make money for an entertainment company, and not the fighters, for an entertainment company. So should he be publicly supporting political candidates? It's one of those things that I would never do it. You wouldn't see me out there waving a banner or what have you, but I'm not in a position where I'm running $1 billion company or I'm the face of $1 billion company. Should he be publicly supporting political candidates? I don't know. The easy answer is no. What you do in your spare time is up to you. It's one of those subjects to me that when I grew up, I was always taught it's one of those things that you don't talk about. But again, and I've said this a couple times in the show, it's 2020. It seems to be one of those things that everybody and their dog talks about on social media and everywhere else. But to me, it's one of those things that you keep close to the vest. And secondarily, how much is it playing to fighters and their issues? Probably not much. I mean, I'm going to ask you a question here that plays into this one. How much is it playing to fighters and their issues? John, do professional mixed martial artists have a union right now?
They do not.
No. Do you think, if this was, what's the movie, The Irishman, do you think Dana White would be a union basher? Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
Probably. But we don't have a union. So how much is it playing to their issues? Not a lot. I'm sure there's fighters that don't appreciate it. I'm sure there's a lot of them that don't appreciate it. And there's some that probably really do. But how much is it playing to the issues? I think it's minor in scale.
I disagree and I agree, which is a horrible answer, but I'll get to it. Yes.
Timeout. I mean,
timeout this time.
Who is this guy? I mean, I only know the Prime Minister of Canada and the different provincial issues that we have up here. I should have thrown that in there as a caveat.
You should have. So here's my take on it. Dana is weird in the sense that he is at times compared to commissioners of sport like you compared him to, and he's at times compared to Vince McMahon. Because the difference is he's in an entertainment business like Vince is, but it's a real sport like Goodell deals with. So it's like you can't pigeonhole him either way. If Vince McMahon was at the Republican National Convention, I wouldn't care. I would expect something like that from him. When Dana does it, it's like he always kind of has kept it real, and I think that we think sometimes, again, timeout. I
got to throw a timeout in there.
Shall be granted.
You're comparing Vince McMahon to Roger Goodell, but they both run football leagues.
They do.
That's real sport.
And I'll take a moment to say that I love the relaunching of the XFL. I think they really did it well.
So stupid.
All right, fair enough. So back to my point about Dana. He is in between both. And so from that perspective, it's hard to judge what he should and shouldn't be doing. I do think that from his perspective, it's a win-win. Number one, he is getting his face very visible. And listen, media is traditionally liberal in their nature, okay? Fans are not, okay? NFL fans are typically conservative. I mean, everybody loves the NFL, but, there's a conservative bend there. NASCAR, hugely conservative. I think if you scan the crowd at MMA events, you would find more red staters than blue staters. I feel that way. I've been to them. I kind of have an idea of what I'm looking at. So now, is that anecdotal and research that doesn't mean, or data that doesn't mean shit? Yes. But my point is that I think that Dana puts himself in front of his demographic, and he curries favor with someone who, when the Ali Act and certain things start making their way through legislation, he can pick up the phone and say, remember that time in Colorado? Why don't you put the kibosh on this? So I think for Dana, it works. It's a win-win. Should he be doing it is a different conversation altogether. And I think it would depend on if you view that he should be impartial in his role. And I don't know that he has to be. I don't know that he's ever been. So I think for him, whether or not I'm stoked about the guy he's supporting, I think that he does have a right to support who he wants. And I think that in this case, it actually benefits him.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at it that way for sure, and it's kind of tough for me to transition, but I will, because this is my favorite segment of the entire show. Whether it's you that comes up with questions or whether it's me, this is hitting the speed bag, and I get excited because I get to come up with 5 rapid response questions that John has never seen before. They could have bearing on MMA. They could have no bearing on MMA. But I do set the 2-minute timer. And if you're following along at home, and this is the first time that you've listened to Early Stoppage, yeah, go ahead.
I'm calling a timeout. There are 2 things in the world that get me anxious. One is not when I'm observed as a teacher, but in my role as a teacher this year, when they observe you, you have to do what's called a pre-conference. And you have to go through everything, all this planning and all this data, and it's like this meeting that you have about what you're going to teach, where in the past, they would just come in and observe you and say, you did this well, you did this poorly. That pre-conference, because I'm not the most organized individual ever, gets me anxious, and this segment gets me it's I'm the coolest cucumber in the wherever cucumbers grow, the cucumber patch. But, man, these 2 things get me anxious. This hitting the speed bag gets me anxious. All right, let's do it.
Timer starts after I read the first question. And question number 1. John, we have 54 fights split between UFC and Bellator this weekend. So I ask you, would you rather glue your eyeballs to the TV and watch 54 straight fights in succession, or fight 5 4-minute rounds against a single main eventer from this weekend? Go.
The fight. I would much rather fight any main eventer. I would rather go 5 rounds with Paul Felder and Dan Hooker at the same time than watch 54 fights in a row.
Okay, fair. Number 2, hot button issue with unified rules of MMA in mind. If you could legalize one illegal strike, what would it be?
Knees to a grounded opponent.
Ooh, dicey. Number 3, fight fans often speculate what walkout song they choose on their way to the cage. Let's flip the script a little bit. Remember when Floyd Mayweather used to come out with Justin Bieber? Okay, yes. So if you could pick a walkout hype man or hype woman, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a good one. I would probably want to resurrect somebody who I like.
That's fair.
So someone that I knew was still alive and not as relevant as they once were.
Like Julio Cesar Chavez Jr.
I would want to walk out with Big Daddy Kane just to get him back out there.
That's fair. Number 4, boxing's bringing out the big guns this weekend in Fury and Wilder for a rematch of the 2019 draw. What rematch do you need to see happen in MMA this year?
What rematch do I need? That's a good question. Let me think about that.
That's a really hard one. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. The rematch that I want to see would probably be, and it doesn't matter if they're in the same promotion?
No.
I want to see Cejudo and DJ fight again.
I want to see Stipe and Ngannou. Number 5. One Championship announced today that they'll be producing an Apprentice spinoff with the potential of, and I quote, 4 billion in viewership, with 12 champions and celebrities being integrated into the competition. If you had to pick one MMA personality and one celebrity to take part in this wackadoodle show, who would they end up being?
One MMA person and one celebrity. So obviously we know who my preferences are with MMA personalities, but that person's already done The Apprentice.
Yes,
So he's out. I would say Dominic Cruz as the MMA guy, and the celebrity would be Tom Cruise, just because I would find that funny. Dominic Cruz and Tom Cruise to be on the scene. That's such a lame answer, but plus I would like to see, no, hold on. I'm going to defend this answer now. I pulled it out of my ass, but I'm going to defend it. You would want to see Tom Cruise on a reality show? Is there a more fish out of water scenario than Tom Cruise on a reality show?
He wouldn't do it.
You didn't ask that. You didn't say who I think would do it. You said who would I want to see.
True. That's true. Do you want my answer? I don't have one like off the cuff. Oh, good plug for the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network.
Cross promotion.
If I had one celebrity that would probably do it, like you wouldn't have to force them to do it, Halle Berry would do it in a heartbeat. So Halle Berry's one of them. Huge MMA fan. And then if I had to pick an actual fighter, and it's not a one championship fighter, I'm going to pick Sergey Kharitonov. Because you want to talk fish out of water, a big Russian guy that's quiet in his own right, how weird would that be? Sergey Kharitonov and Halle Berry, two totally different personalities that would not even clash. They wouldn't even make sense. It would be weird TV, but if 4 billion people are watching, throw Sergey Kharitonov and Halle Berry in front of 4 billion people and see what happens.
Chatri does not need my advice, but here it comes. If you're going to do this, and you're the guy hosting, bring out Misha and Rich Franklin as part of it. Let Misha and Rich Franklin have the Ivanka Trump and Eric Trump roles, and let them we don't see enough of Misha Tate and Rich Franklin anymore. And I think that they would be. I mean, it's going to be subtitled either way, so you might as well just have it.
No, it won't. No, Singapore is a city state, and English is their national language.
I should know that. I'm ashamed. All right, Craig, fantastic questions. As always, I can't wait till I get to toss them out next week. Let's move on to the next segment, which is Rank 'em. I'm going to call this the Bronstetter 4. I'm calling this the Bronstetter 4 because, and props to Aaron Bronstetter, because he asked Dana White about 4 fights that have not yet been booked. And the smart move that he did was he started with the most likely to be booked and went to the least likely to be booked. And the reason why that was genius is because he let Dana get comfortable with the parameters of what they were doing, and it made him more open to answering. It was great job by Aaron Bronstetter if you're listening. All right, so I'm going to do them in order, and then you can rank them. I'm going to do them in order in terms of when we're going to see them. The first fight is looking at the April timeframe. Zabit Magomedsharipov and Brian Ortega. The second fight is Henry Cejudo and Jose Aldo. The third fight is Alex Volkanovski and Max Holloway, a rematch. And the fourth fight is Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal. Please tell me those fights in order of which you think you're most excited for.
Oh, that's easy. I'm glad you asked that, not in which order based on months, because months I have no idea. But if I could base them on excitement level, Usman Masvidal, number 1. Number 2, I'd have to go with Volkanovski Holloway. Somewhat of a close fight, and I think Max Holloway would change his approach. Then I'd go Zabit and Brian Ortega, and it has to be a 5-round main event. No more of this 3-round baloney. We're not Bellator. I almost said Ultimate Defining Championship as a nod to Mike Goldberg, but we're the UFC. Like, no more of that baloney. And then I would say Cejudo Aldo, because Jose Aldo's lost 2 fights in a row and he's getting a title shot, and I will die on the hill of saying that that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm with you on Usman Masvidal for number 1. I'm going to go with Zabit Ortega number 2. And the reason why is because I really feel like that something about the Holloway-Ortega fight just kind of skewed our view of Brian Ortega. And I think that this guy's got a bright future, and I want to see him in a fight. And I don't know if Zabit's the fight, but I want to see him sort of get back to where he was. Go ahead.
Big Ortega guy, and man, Renato Moicano, where have you been? Like, I know the loss to Ortega and the loss to Aldo, those are tough, but come back, Renato. Big fan of watching him fight. But to me, it's the other side of the coin. Zabit with poor performances in the latter stages of a fight, a 3-round fight. I just don't think it, and he might even come out as a favorite here, because I do think a lot of people would sleep on Ortega, like you're saying. But if I was a gambling man, which I'm not, I would go with Brian Ortega in that fight, 100%.
Yeah. You know me, I'm a narrative guy. And I like the narrative of Brian Ortega being resurrected. I'm going to go with Cejudo Aldo third, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't know if I'm coining this term or if I'm stealing it from someone else. If I'm stealing it from you, then I apologize. But Cejudo Aldo is a poster fight. They book these guys because it makes a hell of a poster. And I don't know how great the fight's going to be. Listen, I was a lot more surprised from what I got from Jose Aldo against Marlon Moraes. So he might still have some of it, and again, here comes my Teddy Atlas reference. Teddy Atlas says champions remember. I think that the version of Jose Aldo remembering his greatness was against Marlon Moraes. I don't think he has one more in him for the Cejudo fight. And one thing that Chael says, here's my Chael reference, he said very recently, Henry Cejudo's in the gym as a wrestler. There's this huge wrestler, I guess Henry went there, got called out, and, they went at it. And Henry's a bigger wrestler and all that, but they said he's still there in terms of being a wrestler. And fourth, I'm going to go Volkanovski and Holloway. I am definitely from the school that if you give me 3 or 5 great rounds, I'm the guy that says, I need 5 more rounds. I'm with that. My problem is I thought the first fight was a good one, but at the end, I knew what was up. I knew Volkanovski was the better fighter. I felt like he clearly won. And I'm going to go ahead and apply the same logic to this fight that I applied to the Reyes fight. Volkanovski won the fight, right? Holloway was close for sure, but Volkanovski won the fight. Let him go have his reign as champion and not have to do something he already did. Again, another thing Chael said is the old thing of like when you dare somebody, right? You dare somebody to jump out of a plane, they do it, you don't ask them to do it again, right? They did it. They did the thing. He beat the guy that no one could beat. So let him go do his own thing. Don't make him have to do it again. Don't make him jump the same fence he just cleared.
Yeah, I mean, your argument doesn't hold a lot of water just because of the beginning, because you're also the type of guy who's from the school where you get anxious about pre-conferences. So get your life together, man.
Come on, that's low. Even for you. Even for a guy as low as you, that's low.
Apologies.
All right, new segment alert. Craig, I don't know if this is going to be a dumpster fire or the greatest thing we've ever done. In fairness, the greatest thing we ever done was click or stick. And we're still looking to hit that level again. But here's what we're going to do this week. This week, and it's going to get a little confusing, but when I ask you, it'll make sense. This is called Your Boy, My Boy. This is a new segment where I give you a fighter or media personality who is polarizing. And you either say, that's my boy, or what's up with your boy? AKA, whose mans is this? So when I ask you these guys, tell me, can you see what his fans see in him, or are you just not on board? Let's start with Henry Cejudo. Craig, is that your boy?
It got confusing because you said, what do his fans see in him? See, if I had to answer this as me, I would say, whose mans is this? I mean, really, somebody call him back. Like, Ali, stop tweeting for him. But if you're
no, you don't have to answer. No, I'm saying
that's my boy.
You don't have to answer as his fans, but you can understand why people like him. If you don't understand why
I get the cringe thing. I get it. I mean, you see videos on the interwebs. You get the cringe. But realistically, whose mans is this? I mean, I already kind of touched on it with the race issues, but to get serious, I don't see where the payoff is here. Is the payoff a fight with Aljamain Sterling? Because you're probably going to get Aldo first, so you set yourself up with your next likely opponent. But apart from that, I don't get it. I don't get it.
I think he's a guy who feels like he should be contributing a certain – I'm with you. I'm going to give him a whose mans is this or what's up with your boy, because I don't understand – I know he's trying to put himself out there. It's just clunky. And I get the cringe thing, but I don't think it's doing what he wants it to do.
It's like he's sorry to cut you off. It's like he's in grade 10. See, when you get to high school and you're in grade 9, you know, you stand against the wall. You're still not comfortable with dancing. And then in grade 10, you're in this weird spot where, yeah, I can dance, but when Aerosmith comes on, I'm going to the bathroom and smoking a cigarette like the 1980s. So that's kind of where Henry Cejudo's at right now. He's in cigarette in the bathroom type mode.
All right, Craig, up next, Johnny Bones Jones.
Unfortunately for John Jones fans, he's not smoking cigarettes in the bathroom. So I'll throw that one out there. I will say whose mans is this? I want to say that's my boy, but prior indiscretions had me saying whose mans is this. But currently where he's at, what's the play, John? I mean, I know we made the case for a lot of different fighters, but who's it going to be? Because you want Reyes, you want Blachowicz, you want Miocic, you want Adesanya. Just pick already. Come on.
That's my boy. I'm going that's my boy on Jon Jones because I understand where he's coming from. He's a guy who wants to be great. That probably led him to the PEDs, and he's a guy that likes to party. So that led him to a lot of other things. That led him to hitting a pregnant lady and, you know, stuff like that. And I don't agree with any of that. I will say this, and I'm going to get crushed for this if anybody hears it, but I'm going to say it because it's true. Drinking and driving is one of those things that people – I know, it's a great way to start a sentence. It's one of those things where people are very critical who are some of the same people who probably should have called an Uber a couple of nights. So I'm not saying that you should give people that drink and drive a free pass by any stretch of the imagination. So please don't interpret what I'm saying is that. I'm saying that when people get caught, have a little bit of understanding that maybe I had a beer more than I should have and drove myself. So that's my point.
And
so
if I can defend myself,
for that reason.
Let me defend myself a little bit. I'm not taking a holier than thou approach to this. I'm really not. And I looked at it in both ways. Prior indiscretions, current trajectory. For me, it's the current trajectory. For me, it's, all right, you've got 4 possibilities in front of you that we've named. 4, if not, we named 5. There could be more out there. Just pick something. And I know he just defended recently. I know he just defended, 2.5 weeks ago. But make up your mind. I don't need
back in the cage already. All right, up next, Craig, Ben Askren. That's my boy, or whose man's is this?
I don't give a sweet damn if my boy, I almost said my main boy, but my main guy is Damian Maia. I talk about him all the time because I absolutely love that guy at 170 pounds. I don't care if Ben Askren lost to him in Singapore and get buried. I don't care if he lost to Jorge Masvidal in impressive fashion. I think Ben Askren's great because he promotes wrestling in such great detail and in such a great light on social media that, and excuse me, I hope it brings on the next wave of young wrestlers. So I really like what he's doing. I don't care if he lost his last 2 fights. He gave it his all in the UFC. He definitely bolstered his star. He's my guy.
That's my boy. But I will say this, and you're going to love the 5th, 7th, 9th trail reference I'm about to make. But Ben Askren is like when you go to the grocery store and you see Fruit Loops, and then you see a bag of cereal that looks like Fruit Loops, but it's not. Chael Sonnen is Fruit Loops, and Ben Askren is that bag of generic Fruit Loops. So he's trying to run the same gimmick. He's trying to run the same whatever. Chael's just better at it. But I think that in his heart, Ben Askren is, good for the sport, and he's got the best of it.
And he's not Kamaru Usman, and to wrestling, he's not like Jordan Burroughs, but he's Ben Askren, and he's unique, and that's why I like him.
All right, Craig, Mike Perry, that's my boy, or whose man's is this?
Okay, so there's probably a small sect of fans, whether they're in, I don't know, Rio Rancho or I don't know, pick a location in Florida that are going to say, like, without a doubt, when you ask that question, that's my boy. Whose man's is this, man? Like, again, prior indiscretions, the stupid video in the cage at Jackson Wink before the Donald Cerrone fight. I can't get over that. I get he's a personality and he's entertaining, but he's crossed the line so many times. And, like, what's the last fight that he won? Was it Paul Felder? Has he won since then?
I don't think so.
Like, I'm this far into the show, and these are stats that I should know. I mean, we're relatively safe for work on this podcast, but in terms of actual fights that Mike Perry's had, they're entertaining. But like, his win-loss record in the UFC has to be roughly 500, is it not?
Yeah, he's the last fight he won was Cowboy Oliveira.
Okay, Cowboy Oliveira.
But he's been like alternating for a couple of years. It was 2 losses, then he beat Felder, lost to Cerrone, beat Cowboy, lost to Luque and Neal. So he's on he's on one, if you will.
And I mean, those are all tough fighters to lose to, and you can't really take that from them. But when you're roughly, again, 500 in the UFC and you're just acting foolish on social media, whose man's is this?
Yeah, it's whose man's is this for me too, because this whole like I'm a whatever percent black, and that means that I can say whatever I want to, and the whole thing with Michael Jai White, he just, like you said, man, you got to have a little bit more.
I forgot about that.
You got to have a little bit more self-awareness. And I think that, he's not the brightest guy in the world, or at least he doesn't project that image. I have no idea. I've never tested him, but he doesn't project that he's that intelligent of a guy. So, yeah, I think you just got to know, man. You just got to know that this is who you are and just be better, All right, up next. Conor McGregor. That's my boy. Whose man's is this?
See, if you listen this far into it, you're probably a Cyndi Lauper fan, and I'm pretty sure this wasn't an original Cyndi Lauper song, but now you're going to get to see Craig's true colors. They're coming out. Whose man's is this? I talked about it at the start. You want to talk indiscretions. This is a guy that there's a lot of dark clouds hanging around his head, and as soon as he has a great performance against Cowboy, that gets overshadowed by Stephen A. Smith, Joe Rogan, the commentary, whatever. But to me, Conor McGregor, what's the play at 170? What's the play at 155? We hear you talking about your whiskey. We hear you talking about, don't argue about judging. And I see him on Twitter today. Don't argue that they're going to hold Fury and Wilder apart from each other and they're not going to have another face-off until, the night of the fight when they touch gloves. So realistically, Conor McGregor, whose man's is this? Come on.
I'm with you. I like a lot of the stuff Conor does. I think he's highly entertaining, but I cannot cloud myself to the fact that because he's entertaining, Floyd Mayweather's entertaining, but he has a lot more things in the public eye that are negative to him than Conor does. Conor has allegations. Floyd has charges. And, but that doesn't mean, there's a lot of smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire with Conor. Throwing the dolly and the old guy and, I think that's maybe comes with an entitlement. But with that being said, if Conor McGregor was my friend and this is the path that his life went on, I would have to look at him and go, do I want to still hang out with this guy? Is he a toxic individual? So for me, I'm with you. It's whose man's is this?
Is it worth it? You're probably upgrading yourself from, and I don't know what you drive, but let's say a Volkswagen Passat to a Bentley. Is it worth it? It's probably worth it. Personally, if you're a buddy. There
you go. All right, up next, Khabib Nurmagomedov. That's my boy, or whose man's is this?
That's a tough one.
It is.
Fight-wise, that's my boy. If we're talking ethics, I don't know, and I'm not close to the situation, so I won't comment. So that's troubling as well, because out of all of these fighters we've talked, outside of the cage, inside of the cage, if we're just talking strictly fights, that's my boy. If we're talking outside of it, whose man's is it? I don't know.
I'm on whose man's is this. It's, and here's the thing. I don't want to give Khabib a pass on this, but I do think that he lives in a different world than we live in, and I think other people are pulling the strings. So I don't know that he's committed. Here's what I will say.
It's one of those product of your environment type things to me.
It is. It is. And I want to take this. I want to take him and place how I feel about him onto another person, which will cloud this discussion even further, which is this. I find it hard to believe that someone like Daniel Cormier would vouch for somebody like Khabib Nurmagomedov if he wasn't a stand-up guy. Here's where that falls on its face. There's a lot of people vouching for Ali Abdelaziz, and he's got a lot more where there's smoke, there's fire than Khabib does. And so, if we were going to put Ali on here, which maybe we should, but if we were going to put Ali on here, that's my boy, or whose man's is this? There's a lot of guys I respect that vouch for Ali. Like when I look every time, this is my one, and I'm trying to transition this into Ali. My one person that I cannot reconcile, like two people that I cannot reconcile when it comes to Ali are Justin Gaethje and Frankie Edgar. The fact that they vouch for him makes everything more difficult for me to understand.
Yeah, that's it. That's because he's negotiating contracts for them and he's making money for them. There's a reason why you stand up for them. What does Daniel Cormier stand to gain from endorsing Khabib Nurmagomedov? He's a teammate. But other than that, what's the play there, really? he doesn't have skin in the game, if you're talking about it that way, to use that term. So, I mean, they're buddies in the gym, whatever. And yeah, you've seen the clip. That's another thing that's a little bit contentious is you've seen the clips in the gym where Khabib said some not so PG things in the presence of Daniel Cormier. Maybe that's just a relationship and you and I can't comment it because we weren't there, and maybe the videos are fake. But yeah, there's just some things. But again, product of your environment, and I don't know enough about the situation. So if I just stick strictly to fighting, which is a total, like, now I'm just going off the rails. He's my boy, I guess.
Let's step out of the cage and into the personality area. Luke Thomas.
That's my boy 110%. Now, he blocked me on Twitter a long time ago, and I don't know if I made this public, and it was over a comment that was so stupid. He was talking about the Valerie Loureda fight when she was going to fight Larkin Dash, and it was a big deal because Larkin Dash was a Hooters waitress, blah, 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 and that kind of took the narrative of the fight. And my comment, and I swear to you, if you can go back and find it and it wasn't deleted, was they have to find some way to play up Larkin Dash. Because if they don't, then it's just some random 0-1 fighter taking on Master Valerie Loureda at Taekwondo. That got me blocked by Luke Thomas. Other than that, I like what he does. I like, he's willing to go out there and have a hot take and stand behind it. He's one of the more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. He definitely has a backbone, and he's willing to put himself out there.
I respect him. I do think that he's a little bit too much of a try-hard guy.
He can be harsh, too.
He goes out of his way to beat you over the head with how smart he thinks he is. I'm not crazy about that. He's like he's like half a badass and half a hipster. He can't make up his mind. And so for me, this is the first guy that I'm putting him in a crowd of people. And if I was at a bar and he was at a bar and he started on that bullshit, I would say to my buddy, whose man's is this? So I'm going to give him a whose man's is this for sure. Lastly, our old friend, Brendan Schaub.
Shouts to r/the fighter and the kid. Oh boy, here we go. So if I'm not mistaken, and you can roast me on there if you want, but if I'm not mistaken, it was Monday's episode of The Fighter and the Kid, because the later episode this week had a guest, and it was just a guest and Brian. But to start the week off, the question was, and I'm paraphrasing, are there any fights this weekend? And Brendan more or less said, no, there's not. And Chin goes, yeah, no, there's the card in Auckland with Paul Felder and Dan Hooker. And Brian says, oh, yeah, Paul Felder, he's a really tough guy, good fighter, whatever. And then they just kind of stare into the abyss. There's awkward silence for 5 seconds, and then they continue on. To steal a phrase, what are we doing here, my mans? What? It's called The Fighter and the Kid, and I get that it's a comedy podcast, but and I also see it from another side, and this was a comment that was on the subreddit, was Brendan likes to save some of these fights and some of these different bits of analysis that he can get into for his other show, Below the Belt. So he doesn't want to, as I always say, feed a fed horse. Listen, I'm on Between the Links on Monday, Off the Cuff on Tuesday. I do with Fight Night Picks 2 shows a week, and I do this show. What's that? 5 podcasts? Talking about the same fights 5 times in a week. So you might get the same take twice, and I might change during the week. I don't know what's going to happen. But when you're bringing up fights and you just decide to skirt past a main event and a big card that we have this weekend, or to go back and he's changed his mind, but to say that, and I'm paraphrasing, strawweights don't matter. Whose man is this, really? Is it comedy? Is it entertainment? Or are we talking about sports? Or is it the best damn sports show reimagined, and we just have hot take Susie all day? Like, what is this here?
I think that if he had his way and he could pull this off, he would not talk about fighting anymore. I think the old saying is, dance with the girl you came with. But I think that he's fully prepared to move on. I would venture to say that he owes a lot to Brian Callen. He likes Brian Callen a lot, and he enjoys doing a podcast from that perspective. But he prefers doing the King and Sting with Theo Vaughn because there's not a lot of fighting in there by comparison. And if he could do that kind of podcast with Brian Callen, he'd just as soon do it. So I think that he has a odd relationship with fighting. It's something that he did not succeed at in the way he wanted to, but it's what brought him his fame. So I think that he's prepared to move on. I think that he wants to have the career that The Rock had, where he became famous for this thing and then he could step away from it. Now, The Rock has much more reverence for fighting or for wrestling than Brendan does for fighting. But I think that if he could step away from it completely, he probably would. And I understand that. But for me, it's whose man's is this for a myriad of reasons, which I've gone into on other podcasts.
And it's interesting because for you guys down in the United States of America, you see The Rock as this great, wrestling superstar. But for us up in Canada, this is a standout CFL player that you're talking about. So I see it through that lens.
Just think, man, Brendan could have been in the XFL right now if things had gone differently.
Yeah, right, and Greg. I mean, when Dan Lamort calls me, I'm picking up the phone. I'm doing a comedy podcast with Dan Lamort. See you later, Early Stoppage.
All right, Craig, let's give shouts to MMA Reddit. We kind of mentioned them a second ago. Let's start the conversation this week with scoring. Craig, friend of the show, Joe Solis, was back in the news as we peel the onion. That is Solis' martial arts affiliations. We're starting to find some conflicts of interest. So instead of judging, which we've talked about at length on any number of podcasts on Loudmouth MMA, let's talk about scoring. Let's change the discussion from judging to scoring. My proposition to you is that we turn MMA into a little bit college and high school wrestling. Give a tangible score for all effective techniques in MMA. Train all judges in what those techniques would be and how they're scored. The fight ends with a score based on certain predetermined criteria other than someone's opinion. Craig, your thoughts?
All right. So you Pat Benatar'd me and you hit me with your best shot. Is that your best shot? Is that what you feel is the best technique or the best method?
I think it's flawed only in the sense that there are a lot less techniques in wrestling. And if you get in a fight that's got high volume, it's going to turn into pre-algebra. Like it's going to turn into a math class.
And that's where I'm going to throw this at you. So with unified rules of MMA, advancing stats don't mean a whole lot. Okay, but why does the UFC continue to, closer to the end of the fight, if it's a 3-rounder, we're in the 3rd round, it looks like we're on a decision, they'll start to put advancing stats. PFL does it a lot, and PFL also shows the percentage that a fighter was on the outside versus the inside, which if you've ever watched a mixed martial arts contest, it means absolutely nothing. It's tough. You'd have to rank certain criteria, like you said, to give that tangible score. But when you start to bring volume into it, and it's just so much, if judges right now, the way that it is, get overwhelmed, and we have flawed scorecards with the wrong scores, we get a fight where I'm going to say the majority of people and a lot of people, and I'm sure if you're a listener of this podcast, you've probably gone back and watched the main event of UFC. What was it? Now I can't remember. 247 between Jones and Reyes. My point being, a lot of people's opinions might have shifted about the way that fight was judged. And Kyle made a really good point, actually, on Between the Links. No, it was off the cuff. See, now things get mixed up. 5 podcasts a week. My point being, he made a good point as to why somebody might see that fight as a 49-46. And I completely agree with him. If the rounds are really close, that could happen. So if people are already bogged down with this now, yes, training and, what is it? It takes 10,000 hours to accomplish a habit or to really become good at something. But for judges, they just don't get that. This just seems like you're throwing too much at them and hoping it sticks, and I just don't know if it will.
Yeah, no, you definitely have to change this from a logistical standpoint. I mean, realistically, the way that this would work, and listen, let me explain something else that's a problem here, is that you still are I got to tell you something that I find hilarious. You are on any number of shows that you sit for at least 15 minutes at a time without talking. And when you get around me, you're chomping at the bit to come after whatever I'm saying. I find that hilarious. But that's.
Can I say it?
Go ahead.
To me, this is what MMA fans want to do. And it's a classic, maybe in your part of the country you call it a meme. I have coworkers that call it a meme, and I think that's the funniest thing in the world. Do you want Joe Solis to sit there like Clockwork Orange with his eyes peeled open, and then this is the creepiest thing I've ever done in my life, but you watch his fight tape for years upon years, and then you hope he gets it right? Like, what do you expect out of this guy? I mean, stop ragging on poor Joe Solis and his questionable ties and get with it. But if we want to see real change, I think it's only right that you and I and everybody out there with an MMA podcast come up with a solution, and the powers that be actually start listening to these options.
So, first of all, that's going to be screenshotted. We'll start with that.
Right.
Secondly, I don't think he needs to sit there like a Clockwork Orange, but he could at least pay. It's, you know, these guys can stay off their phones. That's a start.
But okay, did that even happen? Because it didn't. It was commissioner.
Put the sunglasses on. We got to look into it. So I think that there's a way to do it, but here's the problem. It's still a little bit an opinion. So let's say that I decide I'm going to give each judge a setup like Tony Reale has on around the horn. And in front of them is going to be a box. And this box for jabs, this box is for – you just have to hit a button.
So right? Mike Heck on Between the Links. That's who you want judging fights?
So there's 8 – I know, right? Keith will love that. There's 8 buttons, and you push them based on whatever. You're still determining what you think is a significant strike, right? And the alternative to that would be, well, let's just let the fight metrics guys do what the fight metrics guys do. And then, so then what are you doing there? Having these guys watch the fight, and then they're just reporting to these judges, and the judges are doing what? Adding it up? Then what the hell are they there for? Just let the fight metrics guys judge the fight. And then the other question is, do the fights just come down to statistics? If you are giving everything, because how many fights have we watched? Listen, I know I'm poking holes in my own.
No. In the end, John, if the commissioner's trophy in baseball is, as the commissioner put it, just a piece of metal, and we're starting to change baseball into automatic umpires, let's just do it with every sport and take the human element out of it. And then let AI control the world. Come on, John.
Okay, so you're busting balls, but how much do you hate that? How much do you hate that the guy with the better stats wins? Do you hate that?
Okay, so as a guy that does breakdowns and utilizes mainly performance metrics and then adds in a little bit of flavor with my co-host that's no longer with Month MMA Podcast Network, I like stats. I'm a stats guy. I've always been, since I was a little kid, I was a stats guy. So that's what I gravitate towards. But in terms of the way that a fight's scored, it should be clearly objective, and I'm fine with an opinion-based scoring system. Open scoring to me isn't the answer. I think that's just a cheap Band-Aid, and Kansas City's trying to be, again, the cool step kid that wants to impress the stepdad. But if you're going to do it right, like things like this are good. This discussion's great, honestly. And that's why it starts the conversation.
Is that Kansas City, Kansas, or is that Kansas City? Kansas City, Missouri.
The state. They've only had one UFC card ever, and it was in Wichita between who was it? Derek Lewis and Junior Dos Santos.
Look at this guy with the recall. I love it. All right, guys, there you have it. The 17th episode of Early Stoppage is in the books. Be sure and comment, subscribe, like us on YouTube. Let me tell you guys one thing that you have to know. We're on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes. We are now on Spotify. And for me, I'm a podcast listener. My experience with Spotify is one of the better experiences. iTunes, I do like it, but the way that Spotify does their podcasts, once you figure it out, I just like the presentation in the app.
And for me, I mean, realistically, for YouTube, I'm all eyes on that stuff, so make sure you check that out.
I love the double down. All right, let's talk about the network, Craig. Be sure to listen to all the other content, Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network, including the Not Safe for Work podcast with Kyle Steele and Fred Kirby, Between the Links, hosted by Mike Heck, and starring an all-star cast of writers from around MMA, including Greg Allen, including Davidson Baker, including Keith Schillen, the Loudmouth MMA Recap Show with John Franklin and Keith Schillen, the Breakdown Show with Max and Marcel, MMA Yesterday with Kyle Steele and Keith Schillen, the MMA Takeover with Keith Schillen, the Kyle Steele Show, who I can never remember the hosts of that one. I always forget.
Craig Furby.
Huh?
Craig Furby. Isn't that his name?
Yeah, I think that's it. Craig can be followed at Craig Allen FMP. I can be followed at SM Cornerman. The fight has been stopped. We'll see you next week, maybe. We'll see you next week. Craig, say something witty.
Listen, don't go out and have a Bloody Mary this weekend if you're in Auckland. Have a big one on the Terps.
There you have it, guys. We'll see you next week. Peace.
I said I'm moving too far.